Hello everyone, welcome to Realization Hub. My name is Michelle Corazao-Dinu and I am a psychic, healer, channeler, creative person that loves to bridge the gap between consciousness, energy, intuition, spirit, and your everyday life as a human. Today's video is an energy update for September 2021. However, it is a timeless reading because it is recorded in the present moment. I'm going to be covering the energy dynamics for mass consciousness, those of you going through your awakening, and those of you going through your embodied enlightenment. I'm going to go ahead and get started with mass consciousness and the energy dynamics happening on a global level. And the first thing I'll say that I feel like it's master of the obvious kind of stuff is that mass consciousness is definitely emanating this level of stress, tension, resistance, anxiety, kind of ongoing. And so many times if you are experiencing a type of anxiety in your space that feels a little bit out of control, or just increased tension or stress or types of resistance, you might ask yourself the question, is this really mine or is it coming from my environment? Because a lot of people, especially those of you that are energetically sensitive, might be picking up on more levels of stress, tension, anxiety, or resistance simply because it's in the air in mass consciousness. So I want to talk a little bit about why that's happening. One layer that I want to talk about is just the big planetary changes that are starting to happen. If you think about mass consciousness and the earth, you could think about it as like a really big old tree. You know, if you've seen those big old trees that are hundreds of years old that are out in the forest, they have these deep roots and these thick roots, and they just go into the ground and they're just so rock solid and stable, right? And that's kind of a past reflection of what mass consciousness and this planet used to be. It was very old. It was very stable in some ways. It didn't really change in some ways, or it was just super slow and natural to change. However, these days, this is all starting to change. The planet is going through some big changes itself. And really, if you were to think about that old tree and starting to unroot it and kind of pull that tree out from the earth and unroot it and take it away, that's kind of the energy that's happening on the planet right now on a global level, like for the earth. You know, I'm not necessarily talking about the humans, I'm talking about earth itself and earth dynamics, weather, climate, you know, pollution, all this stuff going on. It's kind of an ungrounded feeling that's starting to happen. And it's been happening. This isn't something new, but it's starting to intensify. And it has been intensifying over the past few years, but it's really starting to intensify, this feeling of being this ungrounded feeling happening on the planet. And that's because the planet is changing. And this is kind of giving mass consciousness these like Fern Gully vibes. If you haven't seen that movie, you should definitely check it out or Google it so you know what I'm talking about. But you know, there's definitely some people in mass consciousness that are totally freaking out about the climate change and the global changes, and they can feel it. And they have, if you will, kind of a really strong connection to the earth. And, you know, maybe they've been kind of coming in lifetime after lifetime, being connected to the earth, appreciating the earth, loving the earth, being an activist for the earth, really connected to supporting the earth. And so these people on the planet are kind of freaking out. You know, they can see the impending doom of all of these changes that are happening on a planetary level and are just kind of really out there trying to get people more aware of it, more conscious of it, and more involved in it. And then there's some people out there that really have had their heads buried under the sand, and they really just haven't been aware of the planetary changes that are starting to happen. And some of them are starting to kind of become aware of it. They're noticing the natural disasters, the crazy climate changes, you know, the fires, the floods, the crazy storms, you know, just the bizarre things that are happening in nature itself. as well as the pollution and how that's starting to affect everyday life and the breathing quality. And, people are starting to become aware of like, whoa, we've got to do something about this, kind of for the first time ever. And then you've got people who don't care, who are ignoring it, who are denying it, who are minimizing it, who are just still out there for living their everyday life, who don't want anything to change, and they kind of go into denial or just ignore it in general and kind of come up with their own priorities around anything from power, control, greed, to just wanting things to stay the same. And so you've got those people out there in mass consciousness that are just kind of continuing to live life as if nothing is changing, and continuing to add to the panic of the people that really care about making some changes to sustain ourselves on the planet as the planet changes. And then, you've just got this kind of Fern Gully vibe going on, different parts of mass consciousness responding differently to these planetary changes, and overall just this ungrounded feeling happening on the earth. So some of the anxiety, some of the stress and the tension is kind of coming from that layer of planetary changes, and like all the humans on Earth kind of starting to feel it, starting to get a reality check around it, and starting to wonder like, how are we going to bring balance to this? It's almost too late, and really, something that you can keep an eye on is how this comes to balance. The planet is changing, it's going to continue to change, but things might come into balance to kind of support the sustainability of life here on Earth. And that actually might be technology. We haven't quite totally seen it yet. I mean, we've definitely seen some things emerging in technology to help, the environment, but there might be some bigger shifts that happen along the way around that. Lots of potentials out there, and I haven't quite seen the energy of like what potential we're going into, but currently just see that energy of like kind of that uneasiness, that anxiety of like the earth becoming very ungrounded and living on it as it becomes very ungrounded. Another layer that I'm noticing around mass consciousness is this resistance kind of feeling. And that's kind of coming because it looks like mass consciousness is about to approach another change. However, this change to me energetically didn't really look like a physical change. It looked more like an internal change. So a lot of times this can happen when you're going through a lot of internal change or personal growth or just evolution or transformation in your life, where you might start to feel an anxiety or a stress or resistance inside of you, and maybe it starts to build and build and build. And that might get interpreted as like, oh my gosh, something's going to change, something big's going to change, I'm afraid of it, I got to get ready for it, I can't trust it. But really, a lot of times it might not be an actual physical change happening, it's more of an internal change that's starting to happen. And so this is kind of what I'm picking up for mass consciousness in September. The image I was getting was of mass consciousness kind of standing on a shoreline in front of an ocean that looked like very wintry, very cold, kind of dark, uninviting, and the waves were kind of like hitting the feet of mass consciousness. And mass consciousness was kind of, going into resistance, like, oh, that ocean is too cold, I don't want to get into that ocean. And what I'm picking up about this is that mass consciousness is on the edge of change. However, what I'm picking up on is that mass consciousness starts to come into an internal change first. And all I can really say about that is that this change looks like it's more of an emotional change or a subconscious change. I don't know if if you go back into your own experiences, if you can remember like one of the first times you realized that you had a pattern, that you were repeating a pattern, and that pattern didn't have anything to do with the outside world, but it had a lot to do with your inside world. I just want you to think for a moment what that was like. It's almost like when you're in childhood and you come out of childhood and then you start to repeat these patterns and you realize, oh, I have these patterns. No one else has these patterns. This has to do with how I was raised, or some experience I had in childhood, and this pattern isn't that fun, and now I'm a broken adult or something like that, you know. And a lot of times people, when they discover a pattern for the first time and they realize, holy crap, this comes from within me, a lot of them freak out. A lot of them go into resistance. I don't like this pattern. How do I change this pattern? I don't understand this pattern. You know, how can I get rid of this pattern? And they start looking for band-aids, or they just start suppressing it, or they just go into resistance, or they freak out. It's kind of like having cooties, like, get it off me, get it off me. But they can't, you know. And they don't have the tools to understand it. They don't have the tools to heal it. They don't have the tools to change it. They don't have, you know, the awareness or the education to really handle it, right? And so this is kind of what I'm picking up about mass consciousness. They're right on the edge of kind of going into some experiences with their subconscious, you know, where things start to bubble up in the surface. You know, old patterns start to bubble up from the surface, and it's uncomfortable. It's kind of like that cold, dark, wintry ocean. You don't know what's in there. There's some creepy crawler things in there. It's cold, it's uncomfortable. They don't want to go there. However, at the same time, mass consciousness does want change. On a general level, mass consciousness does want change. And if you've watched any of my videos in June, July, August, you'll see that mass consciousness is kind of at a dead end. They want change. They don't want to go back to where they came from, but at the same time, they're resisting new change. And so in the summertime, there was this accelerated rise in consciousness, and mass consciousness started to go into a bit of a dream state. You know, they just got stuck at this dead end. They started to go into a little bit of an imaginary or a dream state, kind of dreaming up the life that they want to live, you know, energetically. And a lot was happening energetically this summer. A lot of energetic storms cleansing mass consciousness. And now, in order to have these changes that mass consciousness has been dreaming up, they have to go through the growth period of that, the energetic cleansing of that, the healing of that. And that can be very triggering and uncomfortable to navigate for anyone. So mass consciousness, you know, is now kind of on the edge of confronting some internal patterns that have kind of been deep in the subconscious of mass consciousness. And it's all about to come to the surface, okay? Not all of it, but, you know, a wave of it, let's say. You know, and so mass consciousness is kind of in September feeling the resistance of that. You know, they might be kind of feeling like, oh, there's something bad that's going to happen in the world. I can feel it. I can feel it. But really, what's happening is they're about to confront their own shit. And it's not comfortable. They don't like it, right? And so a lot of that is in the air as well, this resistance coming from mass consciousness, because they're about to get shoved into their own subconscious in a way. They're about to confront it in a way, because in order to have change, you have to address the old patterns that keep you from having that change, right? And so yeah, someone's like, wrong. And I'm like, no, you actually do. That's how healing works. You know, you want the change, you want the healing, and then in order to have that healing, a lot of the old stuff has to come to the surface, and you have to release it, okay, for you to have the new change, for you to have the new reality, for you to have the new state that you want to embody, okay? So that's how healing works. A lot of people think that healing is pleasant and nice, and it's a mentally like a really awesome concept, but the experience of healing can be very triggering. And that's kind of what I'm picking up about mass consciousness. You know, it's kind of being like pushed into your own healing without really much choice about it. You know, you're just kind of getting shoved in that unconscious or that subconscious place that was dark, where everything was hidden, and now it all comes to the surface to be confronted. So I'm going to pull a card for mass consciousness, see what comes out, anything else I might need to add to this. For those of you that are sensitive to energy, like I've mentioned before, some of the things you can be asking yourself on the daily Is this anxiety mine? Is this stress mine? Is this tension mine? Is this resistance mine? Because you might be picking up on some things in mass consciousness. Now, the way that happens is that you usually have an energetic match to what's happening in mass consciousness, and that's what has you kind of pick it up, if you will. And so as you become aware of anxiety or resistance or tension or stress, and you recognize that it's not yours, what you can do is just kind of go into your own energetic space and release anything that may be matching mass consciousness, some of the cleansing that they're doing, some of the healing that they're doing, some of the growth that they're going through, the expansion that they're going through. Wherever you might have resistance to that, or wherever you might have some level of match to that, you can go ahead and clear that and start to just be in your own energy, not mass consciousness energy. Another thing I suggest is that when you start to feel an anxiety about change, or you start to just feel like something might bad happen, you might ask yourself, is this just an internal response to change that's happening inside of me? Or is there really something external that's about to change? Sometimes just asking yourself these questions gives you enough distance from the actual experience of these feelings to let you kind of connect with yourself again and get some clarity about what you're going through. Just drop some cards. All right, a couple of cards came out. One was moderation. Yep. And this one was kind of reversed when I pulled it. So it's moderation and follow your dreams. Okay, so yeah, like I mentioned, this, this thing happening in mass consciousness, it's almost like they're approaching an emotional shift internally. And it's all about what they've been dreaming about in the summertime. Like I said, there was kind of a big burst of creative energy in the summer on an energetic level, where mass consciousness was dreaming about kind of the life they wanted to live. And now they're going through the energy of it. Okay. If you think about anytime you've had a dream, let's say you had a dream and you wanted to move to another country, okay? You have that dream, and then the next day, poof, you're in the other country and you're living that life. No, that is not the way it happens. A lot of times, if you dream something, in this case, you're dreaming of moving to another country, well, then you energetically start to go through the growth period so that you can have that dream. Okay, so you might have to decide what country you're moving to. You might have to, make some plans about that. You might have to pack up all your stuff, sell all of your stuff, figure out all the shipping, what you're going to do about your car, your job, the people you're leaving behind, your address, all the paperwork. And it can be a pretty big ordeal. You actually have to show up for the dream. Okay, it doesn't just land in your lap. Sometimes it does. But most of the time, you actually have to show up for your own dream, okay, for what you're trying to create in your life. And so this is kind of what's happening with mass consciousness. They had a burst of creativity in the summer. They were kind of dreaming up their new life, if you will. And now they're going through the energy of it. Now they actually have to show up for it. And it looks like in September, it's a little bit more of this interaction with their subconscious and old patterns that keep them from having that dream. Now, immediately when I pulled this card about moderation, I kind of felt those Fern Gully vibes again. Some of the stuff coming up to the surface is just imbalances where energy has been one-sided inside someone, indulgence or greed or power or fear, just any energy, but just where it has been out of balance, where it has been one-sided. In particular, when I look at this card, I kind of notice where mass consciousness is kind of prioritizing, if you will, what they really want. And And the best way I can explain that is there's a difference between like your deep desires that truly resonate with like why you're here in this life and what you kind of are living as your purpose for being here. And then there are these superficial desires, you know, like I want a new car, I want a mansion, I want to, you know, have a swimming pool with swans floating in them, you know. So we have these like superficial dreams, which are fine. You can have those. I'm not nagging on superficial dreams, but then you've got these deep, deep desires. And I'm kind of seeing, you know, especially in awakening, like many times those superficial desires don't necessarily happen first. A lot of times it's the deep desires that start to really resonate and all the energy starts to respond to those. And so I kind of noticed that happening in September, where a lot of those superficial desires and things that mass consciousness have been wanting all kind of get destroyed in a little bit, in a way, and kind of the actual desire starts to be presented. So we might see an emergence of like a prioritization that starts happening in September, at least energetically. That's what I'm seeing. Again, I'm here to bridge the gap between the unseen world and daily human life. So energetically, there's definitely like a prioritization that's happening with what we're creating here on the planet. All right, so that's my little spiel about mass consciousness. I'm going to go ahead and start tapping into the energy for those of you going into your awakening. So for those of you going through awakening, I'm going to go ahead and pull some cards for you. But the image I was getting for you was of you on a pier, kind of like on a lake or an ocean, and the waves were just kind of moderate. And it was a sunny day outside, so it didn't look like doom or gloom. It looked kind of bright and happy, kind of like a summer day out on a pier. And you were kind of diving in the water and getting out and then diving in the water again. And what I noticed about that image was there's just a general kind of curiosity or willingness to just discover what was in the water. The water didn't look clear, kind of looked murky, but you definitely had this enthusiasm or this curiosity or this essence of discovery of going deep down into the water, diving deep down into the water, getting something and bringing it back to the surface. So I definitely see you leading the way with this kind of emotional shift that might be happening in mass consciousness. You're definitely doing the work, you know, in September. You know, you might notice a pattern, you might notice something happening in your relationship space or in the way you're expressing yourself, and you see that limitation, and then you dive deep, you find out what it's about, you bring it up to the surface, and there it is in the light for you to see. All right. So I'm definitely noticing you guys approaching emotional shifts in September, maybe having a shift, but I definitely kind of get that feeling of you approaching an emotional shift. So I definitely see you kind of leading the way for mass consciousness right now. Whoa. Yeah, and I kind of get a few cards here. One card is love. Another card was shadow. All right, and another card was strength. And really, you know, you might be, this was reversed, this love card. It's so pretty. I immediately got this impression that, you know, in your relationship space, you might be noticing some limitations, like things not going well with relationships, whether it's at work or with your partner or with other people. And that resistance to things not going well makes you go within and makes you kind of go within to find how you're holding that pattern inside of you some way, how you're holding that limitation inside of you in some way. So this card has this potential of turning upright for you in September, kind of this sense of loving yourself You might be motivated to deep dive and find your own patterns underneath the surface because of things not going well with other people. But really, it's a self-loving act. It's for you, and it ultimately heals your heart and what you can have and what you can receive in your life. You see these open arms right here, these open hands, I mean, they're just like getting ready to receive your heart's desires, okay? And there's this self-loving act of going deep, diving in, and doing some of the shadow work. And it's interesting, I pulled this card because that's exactly what I saw you doing. Willingly, consciously diving deep into the subconscious and pulling some things up into the surface. So you will definitely be doing some shadow work, but it looks like you're doing it consciously. You're doing it with the energy of discovering, with the willingness to do it, knowing that it helps bring more of this love energy into your life. Self-love, love into your relationships. Overall, I'm sensing that you're having an emotional shift because you want to have your heart's desires, whether that's a love relationship or just things smoothing out or just having better relationships in general or just having a really amazing relationship with yourself. These are kind of going hand in hand here, okay? Other card I pulled was the Strength card. I definitely see you getting stronger in September. And the energy I see in this card is kind of like a vine reaching higher. So you're getting stronger with kind of what you're reaching for. And again, I think it's pretty interesting. Like in the past, you may have not gone for your dreams. You may have just kind of settled or compromised in your life for things not really working for you or things not really supporting you and just kind of dealing with it. I kind of see in September that you start to get this muscle of like reaching for the stars, of reaching for your dreams, of reaching for what you want, of reaching for your heart desire. And again, this is why this was reversed, because it has this potential of turning upright. You want to reach for your dreams, and it makes you stronger when you do. You confront all the stuff underneath the surface that is keeping you from your dreams. You integrate it, you heal it, you create more havingness, more ability to receive, and you become stronger in your ability to reach for what you really want so that you can have what you really want. So don't be afraid of this emotional shift that's approaching for you. Don't be afraid of doing some deep internal shadow work on an emotional level, especially. And just recognize that this is a self-loving act and you are, preparing for your dreams. You're preparing to receive what your dreams are. And for everyone, it's going to be different, but it might be a relationship. So the only thing I want to say about that is to recognize that you going through your awakening, you are impacting the planet in a big way. You're kind of leading the shifts that are happening in mass consciousness right now. Everything you go through, I see mass consciousness kind of following your steps energetically behind you. So you're, stirring up the planet energetically. You're bringing things to light. You're doing the deep diving. And this is really important for the planet. It really sets up a dynamic for the planet to follow you. So keep it up. You're doing amazing. Stay bright. And if you need any support, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to support you. Hey guys, for those of you going through your embodied enlightenment, I'm going to pull a couple cards for you, see what comes out. When I was noticing for you energetically, just by looking at it clairvoyantly, I was noticing that you guys are continuing to go through like an opening and an unfolding in your life. Specifically seeing that in September, there's a shift in your awareness in general, especially with your life path and your purpose here on earth. It looks like, in the past you have made, especially when it comes to your purpose here, you may have seen that as just like one purpose, or just one pathway that you're walking. And really in September, I see there's an opening and an unfolding that happens where your awareness of your purpose here and your path here starts to really open up, and you start to see a lot of different layers, a lot of different potentials, a lot of different, I guess, dimensions in which you are here in your purpose here. A lot of things happening at once, if you will. It's almost like one pathway turns into hundreds of pathways and you become aware of all of them. And so it does look like an awareness opening is kind of happening. I don't want to call it a shift because I don't necessarily see it as a shift. I see it as more of an opening that you're coming into. And you're just awareness of your purpose here and the way you move forward in your life becomes more open to multiple potentials and multiple things happening at once. You might think that by, working a certain job, you're just in one specific life purpose, but you might become aware of how that one specific life purpose is actually contributing to a lot of things happening at once. So it looked beautiful. I did notice that this opening tends to create stress in your body, and maybe even emotionally as well, or in the stomach area, just like a resistance to changing the way you do things, maybe just emotional stress or physical stress. But I definitely know that this opening and this kind of unfolding that's happening in your life is, for whatever reason, pushing the anxiety button or the stress button or just the tension button on a body level. So I'm going to pull a card for you. Oh, here we go. Merlin, energy healing. Yes. I definitely notice what you're going through in September is definitely a healing. You're kind of changing the way you do things, the way you navigate your life path. Kind of a big change happening here. The way you used to do things wasn't working for you. And maybe the way you used to do things wasn't actually a reflection of your truth. Maybe it was a reflection of the way your family did things, or mass consciousness, or your communities, or your partner, or whatever it might be. So it just looks like you're starting to break some old habits around how you used to do things, and you're bringing it in more resonance to your truth. And there's all that stress and tension isn't a sign that there's something wrong with your body, or there's something bad happening in your life, or that you're losing control, or just trying to come up with some worries that might come up. But really, if you could reframe it, all the stress and the tension and the anxiety is happening because you are allowing a big healing to happen in the way you do things. Yay, magic. The fact that there's Merlin here, and just like, it kind of gives off this magical presence here, so maybe the way you used to do things used to be kind of like inside of a box, lots of effort, lots of thinking, lots of processing, just took a long time. And maybe in September, you start to kind of switch to more of a magic energy where, suddenly it works out. Suddenly it comes together. In this energy, it looks like he's bringing, in this picture, what I'm trying to say is, in this picture, it looks like he's starting to bring all this energy into one big ball, so I do notice things kind of starting to come together. All right, I'm just going to pull one more card. Babaji Yoga. Actually, whenever I tune into this card, it's actually really psychic. Babaji loves intuition, and although this says yoga, I would say that Babaji is coming through and saying, hey, do something like yoga, some kind of stretching, some kind of toning, some kind of exercise, some kind of dancing, some kind of embodied practice to help you get through this body stress. And he also loves to just point out how important your intuition is and how that can help navigate new direction in the way you do things. You know, less thinking, less processing, more knowingness, more intuition can help you with that. All right, everyone, it was a pleasure creating this energy update today. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye.